Excellent. Oh, yay, oh, yay. Make a motion, please approve the agenda. Moved by Dina Watson, discussing the agenda. All in favor? Opposed? Approved. Approval of minutes. Watson Medina. All in favor? Opposed? Agenda approved. Unfinished business. Do we have any? New business. Mr. Governor.
There. By way of updates, so our HR director starts in 2 weeks. She comes highly recommended. She'll be coming over from AAA TA and has a long history of working in HR in the community. We are also spending time on actually 5 searches. So I will personally be leading the search for Supportive Connections, the new Economic Development Director, and the Public Services service area administrator. John will be doing IT and facilities that Kohanic is gearing up to retire. Mm-hmm. So a lot of time and effort will be spent on that over the coming months. We are working with all of the affected parties to get ready for the Good Morning America opportunity for July 3rd. And that should be a fun thing for the city. There's an item on the docket that doesn't identify it specifically, but it'll tee us up for shutting down streets and all that we need to for that opportunity. We are still tinkering with the chambers. Signed an order this morning that's going to take down the overhead mics, replace them with a different product, and point it out towards the chambers so that the voices carry out, and then it won't be so sensitive in picking up every breath you take on the dais. So, still a work in progress. The group that I've been convening for, a couple of months, called Let's Talk Football. We're still doing our preparations, and I can't remember if I've talked about that in this week or not, but there's about 30 of us. It's University of Michigan, school system, Destination Ann Arbor, various law enforcement entities. Long and the short of it is I started convening the group to help us get ready as a community for some of the schools that will be coming here to play at the University of Michigan. And when we first all got together, people thought it was kind of a cute thing. But the point is, schools like the University of Texas, it's not the normal thing when they come to your town. They come in big numbers and they take over. Like when Texas plays Alabama in Tuscaloosa, they will rent out 3 entire hotels. And the hotel is a 4-night minimum. And they know they're only going to be there 2 nights, but they don't care. And they will drop that money just so they can do it. They have already sought to buy out entire restaurants in Ann Arbor. And Grace Singleton, who was part of our group, sent Sarah and me an article this morning that she saw where Southwest Airlines is creating a direct flight from Austin to Detroit just for this game. So we're going to have thousands of people coming to the city. And so how we coordinate, how we put our best foot forward, how we maximize the being here is something that you can't just leave to the athletic department at the university. So that's September the 7th, and then on the 21st, 2 weeks later, USC is coming from Los Angeles, same kind of thing. And then Oregon's coming. So it's a fun thing to work on, but coordination is necessary. Our kickoff breakfast with the University of Michigan is tomorrow. This will launch our formal joint planning efforts around the 5 areas that we discussed previously in this meeting: coordinated land use planning, multimodal transit planning, sustainability, downtown vibrancy, and Chris Cole is going to actually sit on that himself, and coordinated utility planning. So we are looking forward to launching that, and we'll come to you when we have something. Last thing for me in terms of updates, when I attended the employee appreciation picnic a few weeks ago, that's part of what we're doing as part of the bicentennial, it just struck me that it's something we need to be doing more than every 200 years. We're not in a position to pay a lot of money. We don't have many perks. A lot of folks are kind of snowed under constantly on the work side. And so I've been talking with Marty and HR. I'd like to try to figure out something to do once the biennial, when we do our budget cycle, just to show people that we appreciate what they're doing. Because I got so many comments from folks that came, just how much it meant to them that they would be included in an acknowledgement of their service as part of the bicentennial. And we need people to stay. And so any opportunity we can have to let them know we appreciate them is something that we need to do, within reason, but we should be able to figure something out. And those are my updates.
Excellent. Any questions on that? Ms. Court.
2 points to update you on. Since the passing of the council rules where the administrator now has to opine on ordinances, the administrator's office and I have been working closely to make sure that the SharePoint where you put in your request is updated so that they get immediate notification. So we're working in that same system. So just to encourage you to put your request in there, which many of you are already doing, but I'll also send the communication. And the 30 days for the administrator to opine will be tracked in that system as well. And an update on Mr. McDonald's retirement. Fortunately for me, it's looking like the very end of Q3, perhaps even the beginning of Q4. But the job posting for, I don't want to say his position because it is not his position, but for another land use real estate attorney is going to go up this week. So if you have candidates, by all means, encourage them to apply. But that's it.
What level of land use attorney are you looking for?
Yeah. That's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Excellent. Council communication process.
You want me to start? I can. I'm having.
Yeah.
Yes. So we have been pondering how best to further the request that was made in the budget amendment and how we can be of assistance to council. So I think step number 1 would be for us to, I think both of us would like to fully understand your vision so that we can help you further and get some comments from you. And then I think we need to talk about a process because I think what we don't want to do is to be unclear for existing council members, new council members that may come on about how the communication gets written and put together. And so I think we should probably, this seems to be the best forum to talk about that process. But in order for us to assist you with the process, I think we first need to hear your vision more than that was elaborated at that time. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So any comments are welcome.
Sure.
Well, I will start. So the idea in a nutshell is for all residents to get one mailer per year from each council member who represents them. Individually, each council member in a ward would send a mailer to all households within the ward. The content of that would be mostly, just information. Well, it's all informational in nature, but very basic. Here's who I am, how to reach me, what I can help with, and then like just some basic points of contact for the city, for the kinds of things that we hear about most. So I'm thinking like community standards, non-emergency police number, resources for people who are struggling and needing social services, things like that. And then a small section where each council member can, write up a little bit about specific things that they want to highlight. And these need to be, I think this is the right format for coming up with your help, parameters for what can be included in that. Because again, we want to make sure that it's informational, that it's fact-based, that it's I statements, and that, that we're not talking about other council members or anything negative or anything like that. So going beyond that, some of the things that I think we need to work out are, who puts it together. I'm willing to donate my time to create some templates for this that we can use, where, council members can just basically drop in their content. The idea of doing it this way is to not take up staff resources to the greatest extent possible to do this on our own. I think we need to figure out the timing of it, the review process, and the parameters and where those live, which I think we've talked about council rules, at least a few of us in the conversations early on, just to make sure that it's really codified and that we have to stick to it. Yes.
Yeah, I have some, I think, additional questions that I think are important for us to clarify as well around, obviously getting some templates. In my experience with the legislative mailers, there are templates that folks can choose from, and certain things are editable, certain things are not across the board because it's kind of standard content. But then also, some of that is also having the right templates that you're cutting the mail piece to the right size. What are we doing in terms of printing, developing the list that is being mailed out to? All of those things are, I think, still questions for me in terms of how does this process actually play out from start to finish? And some of that is going to require staff time, I would imagine. We're not probably, I don't know where the print shop is, right? I don't, all of those things that go into making sure that this is a pretty standardized process, because I think the most important thing here is to make sure that we have a process that ensures that this is a nonpartisan, non-political, informational mailer.
Yep.
So one thing, and I did bring some things, but I think the comparison to the state reps is a good one. They don't have multiple representatives per House district or per Senate district. When we have 2 people per ward, if we're saying, obviously we can change it, but if we're saying the way we want to design this is one mailer per council member, I encounter on the doors a fair amount of times where people don't even really know that it's a two council member per ward system. Sometimes the senior council member might have more name ID just by virtue of the fact they've been there longer. And just the way mail works, sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. And so there could be a situation where Councilmember Song's mailer goes out, my mailer maybe comes out at a different point in the year or something, or maybe these go together, but one gets kind of shuffled away. I don't know. It's just a question of why not just have them both council members be on the same mailer, because it's a mailer to the ward, and if it's like sort of objective, shouldn't there be that's perhaps another check on it. I know the legal would have to check, but there's another check of like two council members kind of having to say, here are the objective things that everybody needs to know, and here's how to reach both of us. I don't know.
I think that goes a bit into kind of what level of content moderation is happening.
Right.
So,
Sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think to some extent there is information that would be different unless you just have different kind of panels for council members on them. But like my contact information is different than Aisha's contact information. And then kind of to, I guess, Councilmember Jen's point, different council members have different areas of focus. And so to the extent that perhaps, I don't know, because we're in the very beginning stages of this, is it important for constituents to know which commissions I serve on, because those might be points of reference. That is something that's different between us. Is it, what are these pieces of content that I think this is a question for us to answer. What are the pieces of content that are important for council members to highlight in these that would make them unique to a council member versus, to your point, a ward mailer, which I could also see happening, right? I could see a template for both, right? I think there is the possibility that, maybe it's valuable or maybe Aisha and I would prefer to just send one mailer between the two of us for a ward. I could also see council members who don't want to do that with a ward colleague.
Yeah, I'm sensitive to that just because of some of the dynamics that we've had previously on council, where I think that would have been very, very difficult to accomplish. And so, to your point, Chris, I do think it would be important for us to say, I'm Jen, I are one of your two council members, and that there's a link, where folks can go to see everybody, just so that, you're not kind of putting yourself out there as like, I'm your only rep. Yeah. But, I don't think there's anything that would prevent people from doing it together. If they wanted to do two of them.
I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be even envisioning something where, you're agreeing on every piece of content. I would be agreeing more on like a front, like a front back type deal. But I get that might be weird if people do want to highlight things that are in their mind in opposition. But I was just thinking like the idea of one physical mailer going out and then another one going out. I have really encountered the confusion on the door just in terms of like two per ward, what ward, So that's, and I think maybe saying one of your two, that might get there. I think in the other question I have about it, in terms of the here's how to reach me, and I think this would be, I think legal would kind of give us their opinion, but like, I think as far as I understand when I've talked to legal before, like, coffee hours and anything really outside of, the way I've heard it put to me is anything outside of attendance at the meeting can be considered political. And so if someone were to say like, oh, I have one coffee hour a month here, here's how to find out about it, or, I have one coffee a month at this time, at this place, is that information that we'll be allowed to put on it? Because I think that's a here's how to reach me, but does that verge, in our opinion, into political? So that's just like one kind of off the bat question.
If coffee hours were political in nature, they shouldn't be on there. If it's a campaign coffee, if they're not, you shouldn't be announcing at the beginning of the meetings either.
No. When I talked to
I don't want to opine right now.
Yeah, we don't have fine, obviously, but yeah, but I think that there's.
I understand the nature of your question, though.
On that point, other questions would be, is reference to a newsletter that you send out on a regular basis, is that, I would assume that that might be considered political. A website address, I would assume that might be considered political.
Now, we already had this question asked and answered though. And when a former council member was from the table directing people to her website where she had been interviewing staff members and posting during COVID. And so from the table, telling the public to go to her website, and there front and center on the website was a big donate link. And we were told by legal it was fine. So, yeah.
You were told it was fine?
It was fine.
Another question that I think is important for us to, unless this exists somewhere, there are rules at, I believe, every other level about timing of when these can be mailed.
Yeah.
Can't mail a certain number of days before. Yeah.
Blackout.
And so all of those should need to be included in the policy as well.
Yeah.
And staff might also, for efficiency's sake, want to request a certain time instead of just having each council member decide when they want to mail theirs, right? It's for efficiency. Okay.
I assume for cost, mayor's going to be mailing to the entire city.
Yeah.
So that was very built in.
Yeah.
In terms of where these rules reside, I wonder whether they ought to be something different than council rules because council rules are self-enforcing and also not really, and ultimately the gatekeep.
It can be changed.
It all can be changed, but staff isn't in a position to enforce council rules, and I think we want there to be some authority, some gatekeeping, prudence enforcing, pick your concept, but and we want staff to be empowered to say this is, this is no.
Okay.
And I think that needs to be, since that's not a council rule, I think that's a policy, that's a city policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also, there also needs to be obvious clear alignment with campaign finance rules. What I like about this, I think,
Right.
Public, yeah.
Any other thoughts?
One per council member, one per year. I mean, in terms of format and size, my guess is if you have 100,000, I don't know exactly how that's allocated, but you're dividing up. I think that's 2 full mailers in the city. And for the members, or no, 3. Yeah, that's 3 full mailers.
I was with you too.
Because each council member is doing one, so that each board gets passed twice by a council member, and then mayor once.
Yeah.
It's a total of 3 passes, full passes.
Right.
So I don't know whether that puts us from, like, are we at 3 by 5s or at 5 by 7s? What are we? I don't know.
I was basing them on, a typical, typical cost of somewhere between, 4 by 6, 5 by 7. If 2 council members wanted to double up on one, obviously they need it to be bigger, but then they're just doing one.
Maybe city has different posting.
Could be, yes. Better rate.
Often.
Yes.
I don't know.
We'll bring Lisa into this when it gets to the right point. She and I have talked about it a little bit, but we got to kind of flesh out a little bit. Well,
Does the city seal communication?
it needs to be clearly identified as a city communication because it uses city money.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be legit. However, we do that.
But this is supposed to be a communication providing like the most basic, the most essential information that residents might need potentially. I'd be curious to know if staff has some thoughts on information that, since we don't do these types of communications, and we certainly do hear from some residents' desire if there's information that is of interest right now hitting mailboxes. It'd be good to know what that is.
I guess I'll push on the assumption that it's only the sole purposes of those most basic information. I don't know the fact.
It was one of the things that was mentioned at the council table.
That's a non-exclusive purpose.
I know, just saying, it was just one of the items mentioned.
I think a few different things are potentially.
Yeah.
I think my only question is, and I think this will be ironed out as it's some of it, both like there's like legal statutes on this at the state level, I'm sure, and any number of things, but in terms of like the forward-looking information, for example, if someone was saying, I'm working on this, I'm working on that, certainly, like, if they're not referring to like I don't know, like a thing that's coming up on the agenda or like an actual process, maybe they become more, that's how it's using it. Like, I think that's an area where it could really work on somebody. I think you could take different views on that, and I'm sure the attorneys will come up with something, but that's the one I think about. It's like, there's sometimes some statements about very forward-looking things might not line up in the same way that, you know,
I think there's different interpretations. I think there's also some opportunity. I mean, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. This is something that's unique.
Right.
And like other cities already do this.
Yeah.
You know, other cities and the county have, you know, more regular communications. There are places where council members have their own city websites, right? Like web pages. And so like there are rules that exist in other places that I think we can look to that can help us guide this a bit.
Okay. I think that's an excellent point. I think it's everyone's common intent that it had an element of positivity to it, but also I despair of the enforceability of that common intent. And what do we do about that?
Taking a lot of notes. Yes, we should not have the once a year communication that ends on a note of despair.
But who the individual is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what the council wants. I don't know.
Okay, so I've taken a lot of notes. I think Mr. Mahoney and I need to have a conversation on what we think the process could look like that might help you achieve what you want while also staying with parameters that we want, and give us some time on
Legal and practical and credential.
That is us.
Yeah.
You adopt that as a logo?
Yeah.
I think the reality of I mean, what I have learned over the years, both for better or for worse, is that the communications that can come from a political, I mean, they're very thin guidelines on what makes something political from a state legal standpoint or better. And so the question is how much further we would like to go in order to make, because the state guidelines are fairly loose around like it's certain words you can't say. And so, but like an opinion from a council member is, I mean, if an opinion from a council member were inherently political, then you wouldn't have all of the social media openness that you have because it becomes a public forum. And so it's not inherently political simply because it's an opinion. But I think we may want to enforce our own rules on that are more stringent. And that's, I think, a conversation with the full council.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because is it municipal speech or is this?
And therein lies the conundrum.
Yeah.
Because of the
higher level of control of municipal speech.
Yes, yeah. or are we impinging on your right to free speech? And I think the fact that the city is paying for it,
Yes.
and it's supposed to be information about the city, at least on intent, you might take it towards municipal speech, but we'll look at all that and we'll come back to you.
Wonderful.
I look forward to it.
That should be perfect in every way. Are we done with this? Council training and travel.
I mean, I added this or asked to add this. And I think for me, it was just this is also a new budget item that was approved. And I think, we've heard from the administrator previously about why this was needed in certain circumstances over the last year. But I also wanted to make sure, given news from other municipalities or governmental bodies, that we want to probably have some guideposts and things in place. And I know that we referenced the existing travel policy, but I guess I also just wanted to better understand how this was, how we started thinking about how this would be utilized for council members. And if, there are a couple of conferences or something, and it's going to be more than what a council member's allotted, how do we make sure that we're not going over to begin with, or if we are, that's being reclaimed by the city, and how that's all being thought about. And so I just want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a position where this becomes a problem.
There's already a framework in place for the expense side of it. It's the same as with city staff. So if I travel on behalf of the city, there are certain limits on meals, there's limits on other things. And I choose to go over that. I simply have to cover it. So there is a reconciliation process for each instance travel. And that then ultimately goes to the finance department to make sure all the meetings, you have the budget to cover what we just did. From my perspective, the conference attendance is the easiest thing because you have pre-printed materials, it's on a website, it tells you what it is, it gives you normally what the conference hotels are, the rates printed, you know what you're going for. Having that captured is pretty simple. For a council person, if you were to ask me, well, where might an area of sensitivity or caution come in, that would be if an elected person is going on a fact-finding trip. You're not going to a conference. You're going to learn about something in another city. And my advice, the city is going to protect the city. My advice is to take steps to protect yourself. So it needs to be captured in writing. What city are you going to and what area are you going to study? How does it relate to Ann Arbor? Who was your host? Because if we're audited at like 5 years later, and maybe you're not here, you want a clear paper trail of what that trip was about, what the purpose was. It's easy to see that it ties back. We're going to always do the financial reconciliation, but it's more the optic test, the political considerations. Staff cannot judge whether you're going to Orlando is legit. You have to make that judgment. If they're doing something that you think is relevant to what we might do and you want to go look at it, then you're going to have the ability to do that. The point that you raised, Mayor, the last point about staff enforcement. So
I think maybe I can be a little clearer in my question in that specifically looking at the county.
Yeah.
In the circumstance there where, there were commissioners who overspent their allotted budget, and the rules there were essentially like they're supposed to pay that back. I guess I would like to think about how will these expenses be expended in the first place, and is there a check on the front end where you've hit 5,000, there's no going over for it to be clawed back in the first place, or I don't have a city P card. I don't want a city P card, right? But so how would that trip be paid for on the front end so that maybe we can catch that before someone goes over and say, you've hit this, so if you want to continue, this is going to cost you $500. Or is there, if that's not possible or feasible, what is the mechanism that we have to ensure that there is a clawback? Is it, taking it from their salary? Is it, whatever that is, because that doesn't exist at the county level, is my understanding. And so I want to make sure that ultimately taxpayers aren't on the hook if a council member goes over. And then also, I do think that this is a situation where we probably should address something in council rules, because if somebody is doing something that's improper from the city's perspective, I mean, to your point, you would be in an awkward position, frankly, to be trying to police council members on what is and is not a legitimate expense. But the rest of the body probably should be policing council members on that to some extent.
Yeah. So I don't think what happened at the county could happen here based on our system, because we don't have P cards. And so we're just submitting for reimbursement.
Okay.
Right. And so we hit the $5,000 and that's all you get. And you have to cover the rest, right? Yeah.
So the expenses would be coming out of a council member's pocket to begin with, and they would be getting reimbursed.
It depends. There is a process, but there are certain kinds of trips that may require a payment. And when some of you traveled before, my thing was it's not appropriate for us to expect an individual to come out of their pocket for like $1,500 and wait 30 days to get that back. We should be able, if there's an advance that's required to pay something, there's a way to do that. The only, I won't say disagreement, but the only different perspective I'll offer you is it's not awkward for me to tell you if you've done something or about to do something that's inappropriate. What I can't judge is the appropriateness of where you're going. You have to do that. But if you're about to go over 5,000, or you went over 5,000 and you owe the city $300 or whatever it might be, I don't mind having that conversation because it protects you and protects the city. My job is to protect the city. And if I didn't come to you with it, then I'm not doing my job. To Councilmember Ayers' point, without getting into details, it's a colleague institution, but what happened there cannot happen there. Can't.
Right.
No.
So
Come July 1, the money's there.
okay.
The budget's been passed.
Right.
And Sarah and I'll talk, we'll send something out to all 11 people. Just some reminder, if you're going to want to go to a conference, here's what we need. You're planning on doing something. But my advice to you on the non-conference travel you need your own record to protect yourself. So where you're going, why, who you're seeing. We're going to have something here, but you need something for you.
And I think it would personally be helpful to kind of proactively have whether it's a form or a whatever it is. I mean, we need to make sure that we are proactively submitting everything you need for that situation where there might be an audit in the future. Or like, I'm actually a little more concerned hearing like, oh, I might go on a trip and then submit for reimbursement after the fact. I feel like it should be a little bit more proactive than like, I would never intend, I mean, I don't think I would ever be in a situation where I would go on a trip somewhere and then later tell the city about it and expect.
No, that's not what I meant. I just meant that you're paying for it up front.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
But the way that I was kind of like, the way that I was hearing some of this of like, the conference is the easy part, but if you go on a fact-finding mission, it doesn't sound like, you know, in every certain flow. Okay. All right. And that's what I want to make sure we have a process for and that it's very clear to all council members so that everybody's doing it the exact same way.
That might be an easy council rule.
Yeah, or yeah, within the methods,
Yeah. Right, within the ethics portion or something, yeah. Procedure, I don't know.
But to the scenario that you mentioned, something would be dead on its face is a no. Right. I traveled to Dallas. No one knew you went. And now you're saying I spent this and can you reimburse me? There'd be a no.
Yeah.
Because no one knew you went.
Yeah.
I didn't provide anything. Right.
I tend to think, I mean, we've had smaller council budgets in the past, you know, there's been an opportunity. This is a larger, I don't know if there's been something like this in the past, but I do think that it's appropriate that we would have something in the rules and ethics around if you're using city resources to go to a conference or go on fact finding trips, that you know, we are at least sharing with our colleagues or, you know, something about that experience. Obviously, there's a lot of things we can gain, you know, for this, you know, individual commissions and services like that. But this is more than potentially, you know, a relatively local conference that we now have the ability to have resources for.
One question that came up was the issue of international travel and international conferences. I'm wondering if, I mean, obviously the city, as part of my bicentennial, took a international trip to, to Germany, and I think there were things that could be learned in Germany that couldn't be learned anywhere in the U.S. But you could also imagine there's a situation where there's a conference on something internationally, where there's actually also a conference on that in, New York City or something. And so I'm wondering, is there any guidance we want to give in the rules of a similar conference exists, or I don't know. I think there's any number of ways people could want to treat international things. I mean, certain things. I mean, the budget of $5,000, seemingly, it would, depending on the timing and how you're doing things, I mean, that would allow for either a very far conference trip or a few smaller ones. But is there any guidance you want to give members about basically what you're going? I always have to say, but
Well, I mean, I think I would just jump in and say there's the budget is the budget, and I do think we should have rules around it. But there is also an element of it's going to be on you a little bit, right? And each of us is going to be responsible for the consequences of our choices, right? And the choice to do something that folks may have an issue with is going to reflect on that person. You get your budget, you made your case, but also it's public, and so you got to stand by it, right? Or not. Just do it.
Going back a little bit to something that Eric said, I mean, I think that this isn't just a matter of, for me, disclosing to our colleagues, or like, I think this entire budget is something that should probably be disclosed somewhere pretty publicly, to be honest. Like, and if they weren't, I could see this being something that somebody FOIAs annually, right?
Well,
Like,
sure, I would expect that someone will.
Right, but I think this is something that we should proactively be doing in that way.
Sure.
To be transparent about how these dollars are being spent, but also I think this is where I had a similar question. This is probably more related to the mayor. The mayor is would be traveling a lot more frequently on official city business as part of a city delegation or to represent the city. And like, I would expect that would be coming out of this, more professional development budget.
Correct.
And so similarly, I think that comes back to the question, there was a delegation visit to Tübingen. That was a city delegation. I would be fine allocating to that, but to the extent that like something like that were to exceed whatever a council member has, like if they're required to go on an official visit, I don't know that I was required, but this is where I think there's some guidance that's needed again, because if this were to have existed in the year that we were going to Tübingen and I'd already gone to another conference or something like that, should we be saving this for an official city delegation trip? I think there are different types of travel, and what I do think it's important for us to develop kind of guidelines on what these dollars are for and what they're not for.
So the pot of money is labeled professional development for a reason, right? Because there is a fundamental difference between that and traveling on behalf of the city for city business. Okay. I'll give you an example. If Governor Whitmer says, I'm going to take a trade delegation to China because there is a company or two that's interested in Michigan and there is a potential site in Ann Arbor, and I need you to go. It has nothing to do with your 5,000. We need to cover that trip, and you need to be on it because the governor asked, because it's an offense to be in a delegation and Ann Arbor's not there. And, they would interpret that in a much more difficult way. That's business. And we have to cover that. So the conversation we had, 2 years ago when I got here, when someone was asking me about the mayor's travel, no, the mayor represents the city. If the White House says, I need you in the Rose Garden, and we're talking about potential funding that's going to come to the city, the mayor's got to be there. Whether his budget covers it or not, we have to figure that out. We can do those things, and that should not make you have to forfeit your $5,000 because you're going to represent the city. Right. But that doesn't happen that often. Right. And when it does, we can figure it out.
Would it be helpful if I resend the APP that governs councilmember travel? We sent it in August with the form. That'd be helpful. Circulate it to all of you.
The last thing I'll say about it. Part of my job as the chief executive is to serve the board. The scenario that you painted, you're going to, I don't know, Rome, Italy. Well, the question that I might pose to you is, how would you feel if someone questioned you when you got back about that trip? That's all I need to say to you for you to reflect on, is this a trip you want to take? If you then choose to say, yeah, I want to go, then to her point, you got to stand by it.
And And I think for me, some of this conversation, and maybe our existing rules already allow for this, and maybe this is a question to you only, is if in this scenario a council member were to go on a trip to Rome, Italy, and it's later discovered there's no conference, right? But I mean, this is where I want to ensure that we have existing rules that govern our ability to then censure and when all of those things, because there is a public oversight responsibility of the rest of us on that to govern ourselves as well.
Yeah.
And I hope and don't expect for that to happen, but that's the type of oversight that I want to make sure that we have in place proactively, hoping that we will never use it.
To be clear, because I did present it as a hypothetical, I just want to say I was asking because I was wondering if we wanted to have a blanket ban on international travel, just because I don't know, they're just asking. But I think you're saying, I think I agree. I hear the points that you're saying, and I think it makes a lot of sense to say that the responsibility of the person and the responsibility of explaining it, I think that would cover it. But that was the only reason I brought it up.
Right.
It could be a council rule.
Frankly, it's not that wild a suggestion considering what's going on.
I wasn't sort of saying,
but that is exactly what I am trying to avoid.
It seems to me, listening to the discussion, that I think we need to review the APP that Ms. Higgins mentioned, and then take your concerns and see if they're adequately addressed in the APP, or if in fact a new council rule is needed to provide clarity that we're looking for. Yeah. Yep.
The conclusion is that it provides a new rule is needed. Is that next month, or is that next month?
Next month. Okay.
All right. Sorry, Mr.
So at least one question I want to ask, look at is there any distinction because they're elected on going on a trip that's covered? So what I'm getting at, not this city, but if I worked in somewhere else and I was invited to take a big trip, we want you to come here and speak on X. We will cover that trip, because even though I'm officially representing my city, the invitation covered it. But I'm not elected, so I don't have campaign rules or anything to worry about. My question to you is, would you look at, does it matter if someone paid for a trip for them? Was it allowable?
I don't know.
But it's not allowed.
No, we can't. I just want to make sure you said suggesting if somebody paid for us to go on a trip.
Like if there was
but you're representing the city.
If there was a conference and they said, I'd like you to be on a panel about A20, can you come talk about how your city is achieving its climate goals, and I will pay for your trip.
Yeah, I mean, we do have something in the council rules about not accepting any gifts whatsoever. I mean, that's pretty, but that's not a gift. Yeah, in this scenario, you can't. No, you're presenting.
I kind of need to look at that.
Yeah.
Somehow I ended up with all the homework.
Yeah.
I like it.
Anything else on that? Any information or upcoming business? We now come to public comment. If there's no one in the room, but we do have someone online. If 901 wishes to speak at public comment, please raise your hand now by entering *9. Being no one, public comment is closed. The motion to adjourn. Moved by Rodino. Fire discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Adjourned.